Hi, and welcome back to Rolling Hills Soul Care Podcast. My name's Jazzy. I'm here with Chuck. How are you, Chuck?
Hi, Jazzy. I'm doing well today. How about you?
I am just doing splendidly today.
Splendidly.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I just thought of that. That's a word I haven't heard for about 14 years at least. We're just going to move right into getting to know Chuck after I used a word like splendidly. In the spirit of solid segues here, I'm curious because I feel like we all had one of these. When you were a kid, did you have a go-to favorite hiding place?
Oh, a go-to hiding place.
Like either when you were playing hide and seek or when you, like me, were hiding from your parents because you didn't want to go to bed.
Well, I was the perfect child. So
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
I forgot.
Now I'm going to be struck for lying.
I'm moving away from the lightning as we speak.
You know, it's funny because you mentioned hide and seek, and that when you said that, I flashed back to being in grade school and playing with kids in the neighborhood, and the boy 2 houses down from us had a small section off their front porch that was somewhat shrouded by shrubbery.
Oh, okay.
And so that was you
just slide right in there.
That was a good hiding spot that worked at least once. And then,
at least.
That's the problem with good hiding spots is that once it's known, then people keep coming back to it.
You didn't have one that just always worked.
No.
Okay.
No, that's like, I love, I've got my youngest, we have 5 grandkids, and our youngest are 6 and 4. But when they were in the 3-year-old frame, hide and seek.
Oh, yeah.
Was
big stuff.
And Claire was a master of this, where she would find a spot, and then, she never made it difficult to find her. She thought it was a great spot. And then she would say, okay, let's do it again. And I'd say, okay, I'm gonna go count. And then I said, you need to go find a new spot. No, this is a good spot. So she would tell me ahead of time. And I was like, no, you don't understand. You're not supposed to tell me. No, but I like this spot.
This is the best hiding spot that there is.
So having a great hiding spot only works if no one else knows about it. And so my great hiding spot that I reflected on in front of that, and his name was Craig, in front of Craig's front porch, worked great once.
That one time. All right. Well, I mean, I feel I had a fabulous hiding spot that my parents never caught on to, but I can't say it because I'll just plant ideas in people's heads, and I don't want that to go on. So, we'll just say, I love that. I love that I love that you can see her. She has an image of how well she's hiding, but you can totally see her. And so let's read blog post 119 called "Seeing Yourself the Way God Sees You."
Yeah, because there's your segue. Gosh.
Dang, I am just
2 episodes
this.
In a row for Jazzy with segues here. This is good. All right, here's what I wrote. In the 6th chapter of the book of Judges, we are introduced to Gideon. The next 3 chapters of Judges describe some amazing ways in which Gideon was used by God to be an extraordinary leader who led the people of Israel in many victories. But the story doesn't start out that way. Beginning with Judges 6, verse 11, we read that Gideon was threshing his family's wheat in an unconventional way. Because Midianite marauders persistently came through their land and took their crops, Gideon is introduced to us while he is hiding in a wine press while beating out wheat grain in an attempt to prevent the Midianites from seeing what he's doing and stealing the grain. This is the setting when the Lord himself, referred to as the angel of the Lord in the verse, appeared to him and said something very interesting. Quote, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." When I sit back and think about that, it's intriguing that God refers to a man who is hiding in a winepress to thresh his wheat as a mighty man of valor. But Gideon's first response was not about being called a mighty man of valor. Instead, not realizing he was speaking with the Lord himself, Gideon said, quote, "If the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian." End quote. And that was from Judges 6:13. Gideon made the same mistake many of us do when things are not going well. It's easy to sense that God is, quote, "with us" when everything is great. But when circumstances seem to turn against us, we often come to the incorrect conclusion that God is no longer with us. That's the mindset that Gideon is in as the Lord begins this encounter with him. But now we return to God's description of Gideon as a mighty man of valor. That phrase apparently finally sinks in, and Gideon points out in verse 15 that, quote, "My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house," end quote. And this is my bolded point in my written blog. But God sees Gideon as he will be, not simply as he is at this moment in time. God calls Gideon a mighty man of valor before he has done anything to earn that title. And that's a good thing for all of us to remember. God knows our entire life story from beginning to end, and he knew how Gideon would respond to his calling. Gideon was a mighty man of valor because he allowed God to work through him. It took Gideon some time, but he learned to trust God, and that's what enabled him to become what God was already calling him, a mighty man of valor. How do you see yourself? That's a question I often ask myself. As I spend time with God, am I allowing him to speak into my own life and see myself as God sees me? Too often I focus on my failures and faults, and God knows all about those failures and faults, but he doesn't allow those to define who I am. He simply reminds me that I'm a precious child of his. My identity is in him and through him. He sees me as his child, covered by the atoning work of Jesus. And if that's how God sees me, then that's reality, not how I'm feeling about myself or life circumstances at the moment. He's not asking me to go out into this world into my own strength. Instead, he tells me I can do all things through him, Jesus, who gives me strength. And that's Philippians 4:13. And what's better, God doesn't just see the present version of me. He knows I'm a work in progress, and he can already see the final product. Much like the stones that were cut and shaped in the quarry for the building of the temple in Jerusalem, God is cutting and shaping us as living stones in a spiritual house. You can see 1 Peter 2:5 to learn more about that. As you spend your quiet time with God this week, thank him for continuing to shape you to be more like Jesus, and ask him to help you to see a clearer picture of the future version of yourself. Just like Gideon was a mighty man of valor because he trusted God and allowed him to work through him, we can be all that God is calling us to be if we do the same.
Whew. Thank you, Chuck. That's a lot. You said a lot of things in there that again, you always tell us that you write these things to remind yourself, but again, also, every once in a while, they just really come straight to me. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go back and read a few lines of what you wrote that just really reminded me of, my place in the world, like where we can see ourselves. And you said that God knows all about our failures and faults, but he doesn't allow those to define who I am. He simply reminds me that I'm a precious child of his, and my identity is in him and through him. He sees me as his child, covered by the atoning work of Jesus. And then your final sentence in that was, if that's how God sees me, then that's reality. And that hits home because I think it's hard for many of us to see ourselves through God's eyes. I think it's easy for a lot of us to see where we went wrong, see where we might have done that better, notice things about ourselves that we feel are built in that we don't love and that we wish we could change. And I mean, who are we to do that? We have no business focusing on those things, and we have no business denying what God says is reality, that we are his children covered by the atoning work of Jesus. So that's a hard lesson to remember, that when I'm when I'm wallowing in those things sometimes, just really landed on that. That's in itself a bit of an act of disobedience. We're just telling God that what he's told us is, doesn't matter. How I feel is more important. But if that's his reality, and also his reality doesn't change, like that's just how it is. And so that's something big for me personally to work through.
Well, and I'm glad, I thank you for touching on that, because it's interesting. You said it was something that you were able to look at and grasp. You didn't use those words, but it struck you. And I can remember where I was when I first heard something phrased similarly to that. I was at a Christian conference, a camp in Southern California in the mountains, Forest Home Conference Center. And this has been 40 years ago. I recall very little else of that whole week we spent in that conference camp. The two speakers were very good. Like most great teachers of the Bible, we go week in, week out with great teaching here. And if somebody was to ask you, well, tell me what the key teaching points were for these last 4 weeks. We get the deer in the headlights look of, oh shoot,
they were also good.
And that's why I take notes. But it's hard to remember all those things, and yet they were all meaty. They were all helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he said that some people discount how, somebody would say, this is who you are, this is how God sees you, and their response was, but that's just how God sees me. As if that's not, I can deflect it, because that's just how God sees me. And he said, if that's how God sees you, then that's reality, not the other way around. So, and I was convicted by that if that's how God sees anything, God is a God of truth, and he's unchanging, and I need to pay attention to that, because my opinion of that situation, of that person, myself, and we can be that way. It's so hard. Some of us, me included, you want to make me squirm and start complimenting me, and it's like, oh, stop.
Me too.
So we start hearing things when I'll just personalize this. I start hearing things from God about His love for me, and how He wants to use me, and how He is using me, and Satan immediately begins the tape rewind in my head of, oh, let me play all of the bad episodes, and I then have to deflect. No, that's not who I am. I've done bad things, which is true, but it doesn't change how God sees me, because those things have been redeemed, and I forget that. So I'm glad it was helpful for you, because it was super helpful for me, and that's something that was at least 40 years ago, and yet it hit me with such a poignant statement that I can still remember generally where I was sitting in the room.
Yeah,
and
that image is there.
Yeah, it's like a photograph, and while it wasn't what some people might call, well, I don't know if that's very profound, it gave me something to hold on to when the natural doubts come into my mind, to remind me, if that's how God sees you, Chuck, that's reality. Don't You got to hold on to that.
Yeah. It's not God sees us one way and we see ourselves another way.
Right.
It is God sees us one way and that is the way. So that's, to me, that's really powerful. And then when I look at stories like Gideon and others that you pointed out, you see God taking how he sees us, and he doesn't, we might be sitting there waiting to become something better or become our future self, but God doesn't wait for that. He doesn't see who we are at that time as not important or less of a child of his. He didn't wait for Gideon to come out of the hole to go and talk to him. He used the fact that that's where he was at that moment to bring something spectacular that he could see out of Gideon. So, I mean, profound and, a little bit convicting, but also encouraging that if we can bring ourselves to acknowledge that God has reality in how he sees us, and all of our pieces can be used to that glory for him.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's shaping us into the reference I have here is into living stones, and those we tend to think of as, I tend to think of as something that's squared off because it's going to be fitted into a wall of some type, but that's just an analogy. It could just as easily be a statue that I think of the type of things that Michelangelo created and the intricate, delicate shaping of marble. Well, we've got a creator God who's shaping me. He has a perfect image of what he's shaping me into, and I tend to think of he probably several chunks of marble fell off because of my imperfections, and now he's like, well, I was going to make this, but now I'll go for this. And that's not what God's doing. I
don't feel like that, yeah.
God isn't like, oops, well, this is a mess.
That's the pull quote from this podcast. God isn't like, oops.
He is shaping me to be more like Jesus. And I love that because, one, I've reached an age where I can see part of that progress just over time. And yet I realize, oh man, I've got a whole lot more to go. So the shaping process continues. But it makes me excited about what God's at work doing. And it makes me more eager to participate with him in that because he's been faithful. I can look back and see I am not who I really. I'm not somebody that I haven't reached perfection. I'm just like the Apostle Paul says. Not that I've already reached it. I'm nowhere near where Paul was on his journey, but I can see where I was on my journey, and I can see progress, and I can see the shaping and the chipping away of things, and that's encouraging to me because that means God is actively at work in me. And as we discussed in a previous podcast, time is not one of these issues for God. He invented time. He created it. So he's not bound by it. We're always thinking about that. I don't know if I'll have enough time to finish this. God is not wringing his hands going, Chuck is quite a project. I don't know if I've got enough time to do this. Time is not an issue for him. And so I just need to trust him with it.
Yeah, we all do. I mean, this is super encouraging to me. So thank you for all of your posts and all of your time that you put into this, hashing them out with us and sharing your insights as well. But yeah. So if you would like to read more of Chuck's valuable wisdom that he claims not to author, but God gives him to share with us, as I agree, you can always find that on the RH Worship Instagram feed. The links are in there, or you can go to rollinghills.org/worship. That takes you to Chuck's blogs. You can also read past ones, comment if you like to. We are always curious about what might be struck up in your hearts and minds as you read these. So thanks so much for listening, and thank you, Chuck, for being here.
Thank you, Josie.
Yeah, we'll be back.